something down that you first said that I found to be wild, and that is that there's no clear definition of digital asset. It's not defined as a security. How is it currently defined? And how, I mean, from the top, you went through 5 years of, the lifespan of crypto, and that's not even the beginning. So, how has it taken this long to define what that is?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like a digital asset is kind of like a Rorschach's test that people can see in it what they want, and the truth is that it's hard to just put it into one particular silo. Typically, ways that regulators, at least in the U.S., delineate securities from commodities from perhaps like a currency or something else is through the Howey test, which kind of uses four prongs, looking at whether or not there is an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit largely due to the efforts of others. So when you go through this test, I mean, the investment of money is usually pretty self-explanatory because people have to buy crypto on exchanges. Common enterprise, I mean, that's kind of a nebulous phrase, but most of these projects have a team behind them that with a CEO or a founding team, developers. Expectation of profit, I mean, that is a big one. A lot of tokens out there say they have utility, sort of like a carnival ride where you have to hand a ticket to go on the merry-go-round. And so technically there is some utility, but if you ask a lot of people honestly, they're not buying a token in some sort of data storage decentralized project so that they can use that storage as opposed to Dropbox. They're doing it because they hope it's going to go up 10x or 100x in value. And then the expectation of others, this gets into the real question of, okay, how decentralized is this project really? Is this founding team actually like exercising meaningful control over the project, or is it truly in the hands of the community? And to make things even more complicated, even some of these like decentralized protocols are called like dinos, or like decentralized in name only. Because and actually, I did some research into this. It's on my wall behind me, looking at some of these DeFi protocols, where if you actually look at the voting patterns and voting power, typically one or two institutional investors have the ability to propose and pass any proposal that they want, or reject any proposal that they want. So then it even comes down to like, what does decentralized governance look like in practice? And that's just one example of just showing how complicated this type of stuff is. And on top of that, like things can change too. Like something might start out centralized and eventually cross a threshold into being decentralized. SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce actually put together a proposal. She called it a safe harbor proposal, where teams that kind of went this course would be protected from security law enforcement for a period of time, and then once they've been sufficiently decentralized, then they're out in the wild and they have to stay that way. That never got put into action, but I think that kind of just is one example to show you how complex these types of questions can be, and why it's so hard to get clear answers from Congress, the SEC, CFTC, or anybody else.
Hopefully, in 2023, we can see some clear answers. From what you laid that out perfectly, but what you're describing is really complicated. Another word that comes to mind is messy. You actually wrote that in your look ahead. You reported that crypto is entering a transition period, and you described it as messy. Major transitions of any kind usually are. So, Steven, how big of a mess are we talking here?
I think it's going to be pretty messy. I mean, I wrote that my background is actually in geopolitics and looking at like democratic transitions, and when I was looking at that, I was actually thinking of, in some ways, the Arab Spring, when you remember all the different countries that overthrew autocratic leaders, tried to install democracies, and unfortunately most did not. But that was kind of my background when I was writing that. But any sort of period of upheaval is very traumatic and difficult, and we've spent some time talking about the legislative, the regulatory challenges that are going to that hopefully are going to be solved this year. But one other really big sort of like elephant in the room out there is like, what's going to happen with the players in crypto that are still standing. I mean, Genesis, which was the biggest lender in the world, a counterparty to basically every other major crypto trading partner in the industry, has filed for bankruptcy, and there's a multi-billion-dollar hole on its balance sheet, and the industry is trying to figure out if there's a way to have a quick resolution to this, so that any further collateral damage will be abated. But on top of that, I mean, Binance now is the 10,000 pound elephant in the room. It was already the largest crypto exchange in the world, and then when It took out FTX, wittingly or unwittingly, depending on how you see it. Focus is now squarely pegged on this company that few people understand, still does not actually have a headquarters, as difficult as that is to believe. And recently, like, we've been seeing some troubling signs from them, in the sense that they've been commingling customer funds with collateral that's used to back up stable coins that they issue, which is a major no-no, especially in light of what happened with FTX and the lack of controls over segregating customer and exchange funds. And a lot of people I talk to are they don't know what they don't know about Binance, and they're worried about what would happen to the industry if Binance collapsed by way of FTX. The industry has actually been able to absorb FTX. The Bitcoin price now has actually recovered everything that it lost from back in early November when it did collapse. But if Binance turns out to have similar problems, and I'm not saying here that they do, but if they do, that would be very problematic for the industry, at least in the short term.
There's a lot to unpack there, but first I do want to ask you about Binance. Do you think there needs to be a further investigation into Binance? They don't have a headquarters, like you said. Is it confusing on purpose almost?
I don't necessarily know that they're doing it just to create confusion. I've interviewed Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao, or CZ, as he's known in the past, and I mean, he's been forthright in telling me that the company took a ask for forgiveness, not permission approach to regulation, especially in the previous couple of years.
Is that legal, that approach?
I mean, it depends on
what you need to ask for.
Well, no, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, it's the same approach I think that Mark Zuckerberg took when he was trying to build Facebook, or obviously Travis Kalanick did when he was hyperscaling Uber around the world. I mean, there is an argument to be made that if you always wait for regulations, you'll just be waiting forever, and there's somebody that will pass you. So, I mean, I can understand that sentiment in some regards, but if you're going to do that, you have to be hypersensitive to customer welfare. We actually published a story a couple of years ago, a colleague of mine, Michael Del Castillo, where he reported that Binance set up a U.S. affiliate as essentially like a misdirection for U.S. regulators, where they would focus on that, so Binance could continue servicing the U.S. market unabated. So there was a certain degree of all of that. Binance now, I mean, they are getting licenses in countries around the world, in Europe, Middle East, I know, in Asia. I mean, they are saying and doing the right thing, so we'll see what happens there. And your other question about, like, was this all on purpose too? I mean, Binance was also designed to be a bit of a decentralized company, and I know that CZ hands a lot of autonomy off to his different teams to build new products and grow in country. So some of that was necessarily by design, and I'm not trying to imply that there was been malign intent here, but just the business model that Binance put together was sort of customized for super rapid growth and lots of innovation, lots of iteration, and regulators essentially were just being asked to come along for the ride if they wanted